Let's kick things off with the older horses. The Grade 1 Woodward, Saturday afternoon at Saratoga Racecourse. You had a field of 14 signed on, and really this was a product of no diversify, no mind your biscuits. They chose not to send Catalina Cruiser out from the West Coast. That led to just a giant field and no overwhelming choice in this spot. Your favorite ended up being Gunnevera coming in, making his second start off of a considerable layoff. He had a bad injury to his hoof coming out of the Dubai World Cup. His best race put him right there at the end, but the question was, did you really want to settle for 3 or 3.5 to 1 on a horse like Gunnevera, who you know he's a confirmed sort of one-run closer? And the alternative and the problem then became, if not him, then who? You may not have gotten an epic performance, but you had a fun stretch run as they turned for home about 15 wide. Larry Colmus with the stretch run of this year's Woodward.
For home 1-2 with a host of pursuers looking to come and get them. Third is Sunny Ridge. Kurilov is next, and Yoshida is closing with a rush on the far outside. And here comes Yoshida storming home in the center with Gunnevera. These two have kicked it in, and Yoshida has taken the lead under Joel Rosario. Leofric is second on the inside. Yoshida has won the Woodward. It was very close for a second.
Yoshida gets the job done for Bill Mott and company. He finishes first. Gunnevera runs second as the 3-1 favorite. And in third is Leofric, the horse that was out there contesting the lead early on at odds of 19-1 for Brad Cox. He rounds out your trifecta. Let's discuss Yoshida a little bit more. In his dirt debut, he gets the job done. He is now a Grade 1 winner on turf and dirt. He's 5 of 11 lifetime, 8 times in the exacta, over $1.2 million, nearly $1.3 million in career earnings. Owned by Windstar Farm LLC, China Horse Club International Limited, SF Racing LLC, and Head of Plains Partners. Trained by Bill Mott, bred by Northern Farm in Japan. Ridden to victory by Joel Rosario. A big day for Rosario on Saturday afternoon. And you see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by Heart's Cry out of a Canadian frontier mare named Hilda's Passion. And we know what Hilda's Passion was capable of on the main track here in the States when she was running. Now, the nuts and bolts of this race. A little bit interesting to dissect this, and you're going to find that with a few of these races here when we go over them in the recap edition. 102 Beyer speed figure for Yoshida in his dirt debut. That looks good. That makes him a sort of, let's say a fringe contender for a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic, should they choose to go there. We'll talk about that more momentarily. But from a time form standpoint, time form US, factoring in the pace situation, and for what it's worth, the fractions 24, 47, 3, 11 and 2, 36 and 2 for the mile, 117 number. Now again, I've brought up sort of that rough estimate, rough sort of gauge. If you're looking at the differences between the time form ratings and the Beyer speed figures, roughly about a 20-point difference. If you believe that, then you know what? 20 points less than the 117, you're not going to quite be sniffing that 102 range. You're not even going to crack 100 on the Beyer scale. So you need to make a decision which figures you're more inclined to think are accurate this time around. And again, unfortunately, we just won't really know until these horses exit this race and run wherever they plan on running next. As far as Yoshida is concerned, it sounds like he's not going to run again until the Breeders' Cup Classic. That is the inclination from the connections. You've heard folks from the Windstar camp. You've heard Bill Mott discuss it. Mott was quoted afterwards saying, the most impressive part of the whole performance was crossing the wire as easy as he was doing it. At this juncture, we've had greater success at more than a mile, although it hasn't been 10 furlongs, discussing the distance of the Breeders' Cup Classic. I thought visually it was a good effort from Yoshida. I guess the thing that is just sort of nagging at me is that I don't think this was a good field. And I would be curious to know, and look, you can't argue with the fact he got his final 8th in 12:29, but that to me makes it feel even more so that, well, it was kind of run like a turf race. You see that the top 2 finishers came from well out of it, and I realize Leofric and Rally Cry were the 2 cutting out the fractions. They finished 3rd and 4th, but then you had Patch, who came from way out of it. You had Term of Art, who came from way out of it. You had Hence, who came from way out of it. It makes me think that this was just sort of a slowly run race throughout the middle portion, and then they sprinted home, and it was who had anything left in the tank. And Yoshida, being a turf horse, this is kind of the way that he wants to run. And if you look at the final 8ths from these horses, that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting out of it. Gunnevera, 12:46. You look at Leofric, 12:74, and he was up there on the front end, including Rally Cry, 12:82. The fact that they're all shading 13 seconds for that final eighth of a mile. That to me makes it feel like they weren't going that fast early on. Then you had a horse like Patch who was about 50 wide. I thought he was going into the going toward the rail, going to say hello to the folks in the grandstand. He comes home in 12:24. Term of Art 12:45. Hence 12:50. This to me feels like it was run like a turf race, and I'm always going to be leery about that when the time comes. Let's just say, hypothetically, if you threw Diversify into this race, and you see that Leo frickin' Rally Cry, who no one in their right mind would be comparing them talent-wise, no disrespect to their connections, no one would be comparing them to the likes of a Diversify. If Diversify is in this field, can Yoshida be as far back as he was and then still make up all that ground, knowing that Diversify is going to finish as good, if not better, than Leo Frick, than Rally Cry, and he's probably going to go a heck of a lot faster early? That, to me, is where it becomes a difficult sort of piece to analyze with a horse like a Yoshida or even a Gunnevera, who their best move is going to be at the end of the race. And on dirt, traditionally is probably not the right word, but usually that's not a winning recipe. Very infrequently do we see horses coming just, unless it's a complete pace meltdown, and I suppose that's a possibility. You never know, but I'm going to be curious to see, especially if we don't see Yoshida again until the Classic. Can he do it with a faster pace in front of him with more talented horses that aren't going to stop? Gunnevera Antonio Sano said this was a good race for his horse. 1.25 miles of the Classic is better for his horse. I don't have any reason to disagree with that. I do wonder again, is he, when I think of Diversify and Accelerate, and, I suppose they're very clearly 1 and 2 as far as the Classic division is concerned. With their sort of tactical ability, where they're going to be a heck of a lot closer, if not outright on the lead, these two horses, are they going to just have way too much work to do? We'll find out. I think these are very nice horses. To me, Yoshida at least is a little bit more interesting, just because he did finish as well as he did, and he's unexposed on dirt. I mean, he's perfect. Now, again, I don't think he beat a heck of a lot in here, but I think it's at least interesting. If you were telling me that in the Classic Yoshida would be 35-1, maybe I'd listen. But if he's 10-1, no, he doesn't do anything for me at 10-1 in a race like that against much, much, much better horses on dirt. To be honest with you, I personally would run Yoshida back on the turf, but I know that's not going to happen at this point. And by the way, he's worth his weight in gold now. He is a Grade 1 winner on dirt and turf. This is 2 weeks in a row at Saratoga that we had Grade 1 winners crowned on dirt and turf, and now their stud value goes through the roof, especially with Yoshida. He's got an international pedigree. So for the rest of the field, I don't want to sound like I'm giving this race short shrift. I mean, a very disappointing effort from Seeking the Soul. Hopefully everything is okay. Discreet Lover, it was one of those instances where he's probably due for a little bit of a clunker. And he's an overachiever. You're not going to sit here and knock this horse. Sunny Ridge, does he really want to go 1 1/8 miles? Is he really this kind of horse? Taprit was bad again. Imperative clearly can't run anymore. Patch, I guess, but why was he so far back when the pace didn't seem that fast? I mean, if he's going to be going 50 for a half or 51, he's just going to have no chance unless it's an absolute collapse up front. And those two pace setters, Leo Frick and Rally Cry, I thought they ran just fine, but I've never ever thought of them as Grade 1 caliber. So I guess what I'm trying to say is Yoshida and Gunnevera, I thought they both ran well. They were both wide, particularly Gunnevera throughout. I'm just very, very unsure how I feel about them going toward a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic where, you know what, the horses on the front end that you're going to have to go and run down, they're probably a heck of a lot better than the likes of Leo Frick and Rally Cry. Yoshida, nonetheless, an impressive finish. Finished very, very well. Looked good. Galloped out very strong. If you told me he'd be 35-40-1 in the Breeders' Cup Classic, maybe I'd be interested. 10-15, maybe I would just be considering him underneath. We'll wait and see, but the plan right now, it sounds like Yoshida, no more racing until the Breeders' Cup Classic, the first Saturday in November, beneath the Twin Spires at Churchill Downs. He gets the job done in the Grade 1 Woodward closing weekend up at Saratoga. 102 Beyer speed figure, 117 Timeform US rating.